Hi, I'm Larry King, and you're watching Coping with COVID, a special series brought to you by PositiveVoices.com and the International Positive Psychology Association. Our co-host today is my good friend, Dr. James Pawelski, professor of practice at the University of Pennsylvania Positive Psychology Center and founding executive director of the International Positive Psychology Association. Tell them what we have in store today.
Well, Larry, first of all, it's great to see you. We can't always spend time physically with the people that we know and love these days. And so the ability to be able to connect over these kinds of virtual connections is really special. So it's great to see you and great to be with you. So today, we want to talk about the COVID situation. We've got a lot of news. We've got a lot of updates about what's happening around the world. And most of those news reports seem to be about the physical side of things, which of course is very important. But there's also another side of it, and that's the human side. That's the psychological side, how we're reacting to this situation. And so I'm really pleased to have a great friend and colleague of mine, Sonja Lyubomirsky, joining us. Sonja is a distinguished professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of California, Riverside. She's been, Faculty of the Year, Faculty Mentor of the Year. She's highly decorated in the scientific world. Just this past year, she was awarded the Christopher Peterson Gold Medal, which is the highest honor that the International Positive Psychology Association can bestow. This association is the global organization that brings together researchers and practitioners looking specifically at how we can investigate scientifically how we can thrive even under difficult situations. So it's a real pleasure to have Sonja with us on this call.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Hi, James, and nice to meet you, Larry.
Same here. Let's go right into the questioning. Sonja, you've studied happiness for over 2 decades. What can people do to be more happy during this time, and how do you define happy?
I'll start with the definition. I'd like to define happy like scientists do, which is that happiness really has 2 components. And one is a sense that you're satisfied with your life, that your life is good. And the other component has to do with how often you experience positive emotions in your life, whether it's serenity or joy or enthusiasm, pride, curiosity, affection. And so the challenge now is how to maintain those positive emotions and also the sense that your life is a good life and you're progressing towards your life goals. There are some silver linings. People are spending more time with family. They're reconnecting with friends all over the world via Zoom and other video calling. But there's a lot of challenges and downsides. And my answer to how to stay happy amid the pandemic is really my answer to how to stay happy amid any kind of challenge or adversity. Research shows that practicing gratitude, sort of not taking things for granted is important. Research shows that helping others, coming together as a community, as a society to help each other deal with this also makes people happy. Savoring the good things in your life, strengthening your relationships. I could talk for hours about each one of these strategies, but in all, there's a big toolkit that already researchers have come up with that can help us cope with any kind of adversity. So this time, I think positive psychology is more important than ever in this kind of challenging time for everyone all over the world.
James and I'll be asking questions going back and forth. So James, it's your turn.
Great, thanks, Larry. So Sonja, what do you say to people who say, look, emotions tell us about the world. The world is falling apart right now, so we've got negative emotions, and so we shouldn't, happiness is not something we can think about for another 3 or 4 months. What do you say to that?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. The thing is that happiness is not just about feeling good. People who are happier have been shown to be more creative. Happy people have more energy. They have more motivation to address problems. They're physically healthier. Literally, I have studies that show that happier people have stronger immune systems. And so if you're happier, if you are able to maintain and increase your daily positive emotions, whether it's from enjoying that cup of coffee or spending time with your kid or learning something new that now you have time for, you're able to take initiative better. You'll have more energy. You'll be able to fight off the virus better. I wanted to sort of just hot off the presses. We just found out literally when the pandemic hit, we just found out some new results. We did a study where we asked people, we randomly assigned some people to do kind acts for other people, as opposed to kind acts for yourself, like treat yourself, as opposed to a control condition. And we measured RNA gene expression in the blood. And we found that only people who did kind acts for others actually showed shifts in their RNA gene expression that mirrored or were consistent with a healthier immune response. In particular, we believe it's the antiviral genes that were more likely to be expressed when we help others. So here's, I mean, this is very preliminary, you know, we need to replicate it, but here's some suggestion that actually helping other people in this crisis is going to help you not only to feel happier, but to maybe even ward off the virus.
You use the word gratitude. Is it hard for people to be grateful at a time like this?
Mm-hmm. It's very hard. It's hard to be grateful at any time. You know, we tend to, human beings are very good at taking things for granted. And there's an evolutionary value in that we don't want to, we want to kind of move on and make progress. And when we meet one goal, we want to go to the next goal. And challenging times are even harder. But on the other hand, I've seen a lot of gratitude expressed. People are talking about, they're so grateful that they're healthy, you know, that they have their families, or that the ones who are lucky enough to keep their jobs. You know, my husband today was cursing at the computer. He works for the federal government, and he's just cursing and cursing. It's not going well. I'm like, honey, we both have our jobs, you know. We sort of paused to express gratitude for that. So it is hard, but it's doable. We can all do it.
So Sonja, one of the things that we're all experiencing in these times is just a kind of unsettledness. So I'm guessing that a reason why your husband was feeling the way he was is because he was being asked to do new things in new contexts. This interview is kind of a new thing in new context, and we're all kind of sorting out, you know, where do I look and where's the producer and all those kinds of things. And so it's unsettling in the sense that it takes us out of the habits and routines that we've had. But it also raises new possibilities, as you were saying, silver linings. I doubt that the three of us would be having this conversation if it weren't for this situation. So how do you approach that question of the kinds of routines and the habits that are important for kind of providing a kind of stability in our lives that can support the gratitude and the kindness that you've been talking about?
Yeah. Well, I'm not the first person to say that those kind of new structures and routines are really important to reestablish now that we've lost our regular routines, and people have been talking about, you know, having some kind of structure to their day, you know, whether it's to do yoga at home in the morning and then to, you know, homeschool. You know, a lot of us are homeschooling our children essentially, which is very challenging, but that has a routine. It's beginning to have a routine to it. So, but as you say, there's sort of silver linings. People are having Zoom. I'm an extrovert, so I'm someone who is really missing socializing. So we're having Zoom happy hours, Zoom parties. So we're trying to kind of connect in ways that we didn't before. One silver lining that I wanted to mention that I thought was really, really powerful. One of my colleagues said, you know what, maybe we can combat climate change. You know, if our society can all stop and stay at home, something that would seem to be impossible just 2 months ago, when the impossible becomes possible, suddenly maybe a lot of other things that seemed impossible could become possible. So there are some reasons for optimism here as well.
What about social isolation? How do you feel connected to someone who's 6 feet away?
It's so hard. My lab is actually, that is exactly the question that we're interested in, is sort of connection. How do we feel connected, and face-to-face versus digitally? So we've done a number of studies showing that, you know, digital connections are impoverished, right, relative to face-to-face. I actually think 6 feet is okay. 6 feet is better than, I think, the screen in between you. There's something special about breathing the same air. And one of my colleagues from the theater department mentioned how when you speak, you're literally sending vibrations through your bones, and other people are sensing those vibrations. And right now we're speaking through a computer, and so I'm not sensing the vibrations. And of course there's touch, and of course there's smell. But so it is possible to connect, 6 feet away. The digital connections are much more are much more challenging. But I think any kind of medium like video calling that can approximate some of what's really unique about connection, like eye contact. And I actually think one-on-one video calling is much better than many people, because you can really, you can read body language more, you can have the eye contact, you can have the voice. Wearing earbuds really helps, because you can pick up on sort of tone and features of voice that you can't pick up without the earbuds. So that's what I would counsel to do.
So Sonja, we're, you mentioned having kids at home and the schooling environment at home and so on. So we're spending, I think, another silver lining, certainly in my case, I'm spending more time with my son, throughout the day. What thoughts do you have about kids in this context? And I'm thinking about, you were talking about kindness and gratitude and these positive emotions. Are there ways that we can specifically help kids in these times to manage the stressors of the unknowns around the coronavirus and practice those positive emotions?
Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm not so qualified to answer that question, sort of not being an expert on children. I can only really answer it as a mom. I have 4 kids from ages 6 to 20, and they're all having their own challenges. One of my kids had like the best teacher in the school this year in 3rd grade, and now she basically is missing out, at a third of the year. This best teacher, is just not the same, via digital learning. So again, just like with adults, we have routines. We're lucky in the United States to be able to go outside and take walks and enjoy nature and enjoy exercise. But I do think that some of those silver linings, like having a movie night that maybe you didn't have before, or having special meals that we didn't have before. I have to say my kids are not right now. They're none of the 4 are really that distressed. And I think young people don't really understand the magnitude of what's happening. Sometimes some of them kind of feel almost like excited, oh, no school. I think it's really the older people that I would worry about than the younger people.
What advice do you have for those most susceptible to this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the older people especially, are susceptible not only to the virus, but to isolation and loneliness. And we know that loneliness is associated with worse health and worse physical health and worse immune health. So it's actually kind of a double whammy. Not only are you susceptible because maybe you're older, you have an underlying condition, but also because you're isolated, so you're more lonely. And so, and older people often aren't very handy with the technologies that they require. So whatever we can do to reach out to older people, whether it's just calling a neighbor or like waving through, talking to them. I've seen people talking through windows to their neighbors who are older, reaching out to our friends, and certainly for our family members, our grandparents, our parents more often. Yeah, I don't have any, this is not rocket science. I don't think I have any advice that maybe you haven't thought of already. But I just wanted to, I guess, emphasize that research shows that loneliness is very, very bad for health. And it's not clear to me whether exposure to the virus is worse than being isolated and lonely.
So Sonja, one of the things that I know you've worked on is thinking about the role of happiness at work, and how these emotions that you've been talking about, gratitude and kindness and connection, I know is also something that you're focused on and interested in. So what thoughts might you have for us? Again, we're, unsettled and uprooted in the sense of working in, many of us, working at home in home offices or things that we've kind of rigged up offices in some ways. What thoughts might you have for us about the importance of happiness for productivity, even in those environments?
Yeah. My thoughts about happiness at work are really the same whether you're working at home and having a lot of meetings on video or working at the office. It's very important, I think, to maintain and experience bursts of positive emotions, whether it's just feeling good because you solved the problem, or you wrote a really great memo, or you had a good meeting. Because we know from research that positive emotions at work are associated with or lead to greater productivity, more creativity, more flexible thinking, greater generosity in helping to your colleagues, being a better organizational citizen, less burnout, less stress. So the more that we can experience positive emotions, the better at work. So no matter how that works for you, it could be take a break and do something that you really love to do and then get back, and then you're going to be more productive. And then of course, having that structure and getting out of your pajamas. You know, I saw one of my friends on Facebook posted at 9 p.m. He said, remember friends, 9 p.m. was when you change from your day pajamas into your night pajamas. I think it's better, you know, take a shower, put your makeup on, you know, maybe put nice clothes on and feel like you're ready to attack the workday.
How has the study of positive psychology impacted your life? Can you give me one thing a person can do this minute to feel better?
Okay. Well, I love savoring. Savoring is basically when you try to extract the greatest sort of positive emotion from a moment. So it could be savoring a croissant that you're eating. It could be savoring a piece of music. It could be savoring a conversation with someone you love, or even a memory, looking at a photo, a video clip. And so that could provide a really quick moment of positivity, and use your senses, you know, whether it's hearing or touch or smell or taste. The senses are really important for savoring.
How have your habits, your individual habits changed?
Yeah, I think I've grown to really, I guess, to really believe that connecting with others is critical to happiness more than I did before. And so one way, that's very direct way that my research has changed my life, is that I deliberately, intentionally spend time connecting with others. And not just, I mean, I think the shallow connections that are important for the chit chat is important, which, by the way, we're missing now. We can't even say hi to our barista anymore, right? It's all distant now. But the deep connections, especially when I talk to a friend or a family member or colleague, I like to ask them deeper questions. It doesn't have to be, you know, tell me your deepest secrets, but it could just be like, I don't know, what are you looking forward to next week? You know, or what happened last week that you were surprised by? Or I asked my family, I was asking people at the dinner table last night, tell me something that you read today that you really disagreed with, you know, and why? So I think those kinds of conversations that deepen connections are really critical for all of us to feel like we're interdependent. We're all human. We're all, you know, we're all part of the same, you know, world, and it makes us happier.
I love that, Sonja. And one of the things that you and I have talked about in terms of my own research on the humanities and human flourishing, how the arts and the humanities are vehicles of really being allowing for that deep connection. When you read a novel and then you meet with your book club virtually these days, but you can still have those conversations that bring up really important things in our lives. So I wanted to follow up asking you about another aspect of your research, which is specifically about the right fit. So when it comes to happiness, cultivating these emotions, what is it that works well for one person? And you were just talking about savoring, for example, right? May or may not work as well for someone else. So what thoughts do you have about helping individual, you know, each one of us find a way that it's not just pretending like, okay, this is great, but we really feel the emotion inside?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the themes, I have a book called The How of Happiness, where I talk about the importance of fit. And one way to do, I think the easiest way is just to do some me search, just to kind of self-experiment. So maybe next week or the next couple of weeks, try to write in a gratitude journal, try to savor, try to do a little random act of kindness every day. Help someone with technology, for example. Run an errand for an elderly neighbor. Come up with some kind of goal that you want to meet. Physical exercise, practicing spirituality and religion if you're religious or spiritual. So try all these different things. And most of us already kind of have a sense, that's not going to work for me. Like, I hate counting blessings. Like, I find it really hokey and trite to write a list of what I'm grateful for. Other people swear by that. And research shows that it really helps them. And so I know I'm not going to do that. That's not going to help me. So we should all do some research. And another thing that I do with my classes is that I have them maybe 4 times a day, say at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., 6 p.m., 10 p.m., write down what are you doing, how are you feeling, who are you with, and then track that over time. And then you might discover that, oh, you know what, I'm actually happier in the morning than I am at night, or I'm really not happy when I'm talking to that friend. And so maybe I should spend less time talking to that friend. So we should all do some research, and that's going to give us some insight into what makes us happy and what can be sort of a reliable happiness booster for each of us.
I've got a few more questions, and then James and I will wrap it up.
Okay.
How about cheering up loved ones during this time? What's the best advice that you want to cheer them down?
I guess my best advice is not to approach it as like I'm cheering you up, but just do it a little bit more indirectly. Because I think if you're feeling down, you kind of don't want to be like cheered up, but indirectly, you know, maybe start a conversation, call them up and start a conversation about something that you both enjoy. Maybe it's a movie that you both saw. Maybe it's that summer that you have some memories about. Maybe it's someone really loves to talk about, I don't know, botany, and so talk about that, cooking. And so it's really about distracting them and redirecting their attention from whatever is anxiety provoking or sadness provoking onto something more neutral or more positive.
How about dealing with anxiety?
I mean, that's huge. There's a lot of anxiety, and you know, some people might need to go to a mental health professional and might need to get some medication for that. If you're not sort of at the clinical level of anxiety, again, I think a lot of it is about redirecting attention. You know, William James, I know James Pawelski and I love William James. He has this great quote that I think is one of the greatest quotes of all time, which is, "My experience is what I agree to attend to." My experience is what I agree to attend to. So what you're paying attention to in this very moment is your experience. It is your life. If you're paying attention to, oh my God, things are so horrible in the world, that's going to be your experience. If you redirect that attention to something more neutral or positive, could even be just reading a novel, you're going to be less anxious.
What do you tell people who, let's say, tried a lot of things and still feel down? How about the last resort?
Well, one of the last resorts is medication, and I don't think we should dismiss that. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
That's the first time I've interviewed a psychologist who said, "I don't know."
The beginning of wisdom.
That's an important thing to be.
Yeah, right. The beginning of wisdom is knowing how little you know. Yeah.
It's an important thing to be able to say. Yeah.
James, you want to wrap things up? You have a final question?
Sure. Yeah, I've got just one final question, Sonja. In terms of these activities or things that we can do, you mentioned, you know, savoring and kindness and gratitude and so forth. Now, is this something where you practice this and then you're good? Is it something that you need to continue to practice? I mean, is it kind of like taking a shower, brushing your teeth? It lasts for a while, but you got to come back at it. Like, how can we use these for shifting our happiness levels in the longer term?
In terms of practicing these sort of activities or strategies that can boost happiness, I think of them as similar to diet and exercise. You know, you can't just go on a diet for 2 weeks or go to the gym for 2 weeks and then you're done. You know, it's something you maintain your whole life. Now, fortunately, if you practice gratitude, for example, on a regular basis, if you start sort of appreciating what you have rather than comparing yourself to someone who has more than you, it's going to become more habitual. It's going to be easier. It's going to come more naturally. So you don't have to kind of deliberately say, right now I got to count my blessings. But absolutely, these habits are ones that it's really great for us to build. You know, I just got an email yesterday from an emergency room physician at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. She's on the front lines of the COVID crisis. It's just hit LA County a couple of days ago. And she said, can you give us physicians, our emergency room workers, some tips? And she said something like, if we all survive this pandemic, which, by the way, just that phrase kind of scared me. If we all survive the pandemic, we want to come out of it stronger than before. So maybe one of the silver linings, if we learn these strategies now, these tools to maintain happiness, that after the pandemic is over, we will still have those strategies and we will have a more flourishing, happier life going forward.
Sonja, we thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to have you on my show on Hulu. You're a great guest.
Thank you so much, Larry. Thank you. And I have to tell you, I grew up watching your show at night. So for years and years and years. It's really lovely to talk to you.
You're aging me. Don't go away. After this break, James and I are going to wrap things up. Thanks again, Sonja.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sonja. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back to our Coping with COVID special. We just interviewed Sonja Lyubomirsky. Am I pronouncing that right?
Lyubomirsky. Yep. And Larry, do you know what Lyubomirsky actually means? It actually means peace and love, believe it or not. That's her last name, Lyubomirsky.
She's a world authority on the science of happiness. Okay, what do you want our viewers to take away from this today, James?
Well, Larry, there were a couple of things that I heard Sonja say that I thought were really important. I'm curious what you make of them too. And one of them is that it's easy to think about our lives now in these challenging circumstances, and for our attention just to be grabbed by the headlines, right? Now, it's important to know what we need to do, practice safe, social distancing and those kinds of things. But if all we do is focus our attention on the bad news, that's not going to allow us to have the psychological balance that we need for our daily lives. So again, she quoted William James, "My experience is what I agree to attend to." So we need to make sure that we're proactively balancing the news that we're getting that's not good news, and we need to be sure that we're acknowledging what's happening in the world, but not getting stuck in it, and making room for connections, making room for gratitude, making room for savoring and kindness. What do you think about that, Larry?
I agree. And is it hard in this era I once asked Edward Bennett Williams, the great lawyer, if he was optimistic or pessimistic about life. And he said, "Of course I'm pessimistic, I'm smart." I would say that I'm pretty pessimistic. I see the world every day, and I don't know about things getting better. Are you optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, Larry, I'm a philosopher, so I'm going to dodge and say neither. I'm going to say that I am a realistic optimist. Now, we tend to think of realism as being, on one side and optimism as being on the opposite side, but there's actually an overlap between realism and optimism. Another researcher, Sandra Schneider in positive psychology, talks about this. So if you think about our current situation, oftentimes, people who say they're pessimists, do you think that life is going to get bad, worse, things are going to fall apart? If you think about being an optimist, the way we think about that is, oh, you're not connected to what's really going on. You think things are going to be great and so on. But realistic optimism is noting that there's actually a fair amount of indeterminacy, of things that are up for play in our world. So what does this mean to be self-isolated, to be quarantined in our rooms? What does this mean? Well, the facts of the case don't fully determine what that means for us, because one person might say, well, that means life is over. Another person might say, well, that means I've got to be creative about how I can be kind with other people, or that means I have to be creative about how I can find the silver linings. And that's not disassociating from reality. What I like to say is that, positive psychology is not an escape from reality. It's an escape to reality. So I think pessimism and optimism can both be escapes from reality. Life is terrible, or life is fabulous. And being in the middle where we can see kind of a realistic optimism, to my mind, is a very good approach.
James, this was very instructive today. We had a great guest. Let's do a lot more of these.
That sounds great, Larry. It's always great to see you and talk with you. And I think it's an opportune time. As I mentioned, Sonja is one of the leading lights in this field. There are a lot of other researchers who've been spending decades looking into these things. And so let's definitely talk with them and get some of their wisdom and practical advice.
See you soon, James.
Sounds good. See you, Larry. Take care.